Imagine, if you will, not just some petty thief, who grabs a wallet and just disappears. Picture instead someone incredibly sophisticated, very patient, an adversary who doesn't just break your defenses. They subtly move into your digital house, unpack their bags, maybe redecorate your network a bit, and then quietly start siphoning off your most valuable secrets. And this can go on for months, maybe even years, and, well, you're probably completely unaware. This is the pretty chilling picture of an advanced persistent threat, or APT. They're kind of the most sophisticated, often state-backed house guests from hell in the digital world. So today we're doing a deep dive into these shadowy figures, these sort of digital ninjas who are just relentlessly pilfering secrets, subtly disrupting critical systems. And they're fundamentally redefining, the whole landscape of digital conflict. Our mission here, to basically demystify who these actors are, what their elaborate playbook involves, who they're actually working for, and crucially, why. Why invest such immense resources and, frankly, strategic patience in these kinds of operations? We're drawing from a really fantastic source today that, believe it or not, brings a surprising amount of wit and wisdom to what is, let's face it, a very serious topic. It should help us unpack these complex insights with enough compelling detail to, well, keep you hooked. So if you're looking to really get a handle on the cutting edge of cyber warfare and espionage, you should definitely buckle up.
It's absolutely true. The whole concept of advanced persistent threats, it can feel really overwhelming at first, almost like something reserved for, high-level intelligence briefings. But our goal here in this deep dive is to make it really accessible and, more importantly, profoundly relevant for you. We want to connect the dots, offer you a shortcut maybe, to understanding why these sophisticated adversaries are, arguably, the most significant cyber threat facing well, everyone. Individuals, corporations, nations alike in our interconnected world. These aren't just abstract technical terms we're throwing around. They represent the very forefront of digital conflict. And they impact everything from national security, economic stability, right down to the privacy of our own personal data. What's really fascinating here is that we're talking about adversaries with capabilities far, far beyond what your average cyber criminal possesses. They are exceptionally well-resourced, incredibly patient, and driven by really strategic objectives. So understanding their operations isn't just some academic exercise. It's actually a vital part of navigating the modern digital landscape we all live in.
Okay, so let's unpack this acronym, APT. It definitely sounds intimidating, and believe me, it absolutely is. But to really grasp who these digital ninjas are, let's first maybe clarify who they aren't. We're not talking about, opportunistic hackers looking for a quick buck or defacing websites just for bragging rights. We're not even talking about highly skilled individuals just working completely alone. No. APTs, they exist in the digital big leagues. They're basically the cyber equivalent of these clandestine state intelligence agencies. They're equipped with specialized units, huge budgets, and capabilities that honestly would make even a James Bond villain kind of envious.
Yeah, that's a really crucial distinction, and it sets the stage perfectly. What fundamentally defines these groups, and what truly elevates them above the vast majority of other cyber actors, is their backing. APTs are, in their sort of classical and most impactful definition, almost universally nation-state-sponsored groups. So this means that governments, or their closely affiliated, often kind of shadowy proxies, they're the ones providing the strategic direction, the immense resources, and the necessary infrastructure. These aren't independent contractors or lone wolves. These are elite hackers operating with the full weight of the state behind them. Often they're actually intelligence operatives or military personnel from dedicated cyber units. Their missions are tied directly to national strategic objectives, which gives them this unparalleled scope and impact.
And some of these groups have names that sound, well, almost deceptively benign, wouldn't you say? Like, take Russia's APT-28, for example. It's more widely known as Fancy Bear. Sounds pretty cuddly, doesn't it? But this is probably the cuddliest name for election meddling miscreants you could possibly imagine. What makes Fancy Bear such a, quintessential example of an APT?
Fancy Bear, or APT-28. Yeah, it's the prime example. And the name's a deceptive nature is almost kind of fitting for their covert operations, This group is widely attributed to the Russian Military Intelligence Agency, the GRU. So that highlights that direct state sponsorship right there. Their activities consistently focus on political targets, think tanks, election-related entities, defense organizations, things like that. And there's a clear objective: information warfare and strategic disruption. For instance, their involvement in the 2016 U.S. election interference campaigns, through hacking and then leaking politically sensitive information, that really showcased their capacity to directly influence geopolitical outcomes. They often use sophisticated spear phishing campaigns, zero-day exploits, and their operations aren't just designed to steal data. They strategically weaponize it for political gain, sowing discord, influencing public opinion on a global scale. And that requires not just technical skill, but also like a deep understanding of political science and, well, psychological manipulation.
And then there's China's APT-41, often called Double Dragon. That name actually reminds me of an old video game. But it's quite fitting, isn't it? Because this group has this unique and, frankly, rather aggressive dual targeting strategy. They hit both government and private sectors with pretty remarkable efficiency.
Oh, APT-41 or Double Dragon, yeah, that's a truly fascinating case study. It really demonstrates the evolving and sometimes, frankly, blurred lines in state-sponsored cyber activity. While it's firmly believed to be a state-sponsored entity operating out of China, what really distinguishes them is this dual mandate they seem to have. On one hand, they engage in traditional state-sponsored espionage, meticulously targeting strategic industries, government agencies, critical infrastructure to pilfer intellectual property, and sensitive state secrets for national benefit. But then simultaneously, they've also been observed engaging in financially motivated cybercrime, seemingly for personal or group enrichment. This dual capability makes them incredibly potent. They can leverage state-level resources and expertise not only for national objectives, but also maybe to fund their own operations or generate illicit revenue. This versatility just expands their operational scope and gives them access to an even wider array of valuable data and potential targets. It makes them a very, very significant threat.
So while we might occasionally hear about, really well-funded criminal syndicates or maybe even rogue insiders doing sophisticated attacks, you're really emphasizing that state sponsorship is the absolute hallmark of a true advanced persistent threat, primarily because of the sheer scale of resources and the strategic objectives involved, right?
Absolutely, that's a critical point to keep reiterating. While yes, criminal enterprises can indeed launch very sophisticated attacks, and they might achieve elements of advanced or persistent behavior, the defining characteristic of a true advanced persistent threat, in its sort of classical definition, is that unwavering state backing. I mean, just consider the resources involved, the immense time commitment, the vast talent pool needed to develop custom malware and zero-day exploits. Not to mention building secure global infrastructure, the ability to operate across national borders with a certain degree of impunity, and that crucial long-term strategic patience. These are all luxuries, really, and necessities that are almost exclusively available only to national governments. APT operations aren't about quick financial returns. They're long-haul investments designed to achieve strategic national objectives. And that requires sustained investment and institutional support that, frankly, purely criminal groups just can't maintain.
Okay, got it. Let's zoom in then on the advanced part of APT. Our source notes these groups use, and I quote, tools that make regular viruses look like crayon drawings. What does this sophistication really entail? We're talking custom malware and zero-day exploits. The guide explains these are basically brand new bugs no one's patched yet. Can you maybe dig a bit deeper into why these two things are so incredibly powerful?
Right. The advanced aspect is definitely where their capabilities truly shine. It's what sets them apart from the vast majority of cyber adversaries out there. When we talk about custom malware, we're not referring to, generic off-the-shelf viruses that your standard antivirus program can easily detect. Instead, APT groups develop unique, highly specialized malicious code. It's often specifically tailored for a particular target, a specific system, or a single objective. This often involves really sophisticated techniques like polymorphic code, which constantly changes its signature to evade detection, or anti-analysis capabilities, allowing the malware to sort of detect if it's being run in a virtual environment or sandbox, and then it just lies dormant, and various obfuscation methods to hide its true purpose. This bespoke development makes it incredibly difficult for traditional defenses, which mostly rely on known signatures, to recognize and block. Each piece of custom malware is essentially a digital key designed for one very specific lock. And then, you mentioned zero-day exploits.
This is arguably the pinnacle of their advanced capabilities, and it's where you really see the immense resources come into play. A zero-day is a vulnerability in software or hardware that is completely unknown to the vendor. That means there's simply no patch available to fix it. Zip. Nada. So when an APT group discovers or develops and successfully exploits such a vulnerability, they gain this open, undetected door into a system. A door that nobody else, not even the software developers themselves, knows exists. The acquisition or development of these zero days is incredibly costly. It often involves dedicated research teams spending months, maybe even years, just to find a single flaw. Their power lies in their ability to bypass virtually all standard security measures that rely on known vulnerabilities. This grants APTs access to systems before anyone even has a chance to defend against it. This level of technical prowess, combined with the financial and human capital needed to acquire or develop such exploits, is a pretty definitive indicator of state-level sponsorship.
Okay, moving on to the persistent aspect. Our source illustrates this brilliantly, saying APTs don't smash and grab, they lurk for months or years. They blend in like that one chameleon in a room full of lizards, or as the source humorously puts it, they are the persistent house guests from hell. Yeah, this long game, that's truly what makes them so insidious, isn't it?
The persistent aspect is absolutely crucial. Yes. And it really defines their strategic patience and their long-term objectives. Unlike, typical cybercriminals who are aiming for a quick financial payoff like a ransomware payout or maybe dumping credit card details and then they just vanish. APTs are in it for the long haul. They might infiltrate a network and then stay completely undetected for months, sometimes even years, meticulously mapping the entire infrastructure, identifying high-value targets, and exfiltrating data incrementally, bit by bit, specifically to avoid detection. This persistence allows them to establish multiple footholds and backdoors within the network, which makes it incredibly difficult to completely dislodge them, even if one point of entry is discovered and shut down. They invest heavily in maintaining access, adapting their tactics, their tools, their infrastructure if needed, and ensuring their presence remains totally covert while they achieve their intelligence gathering or sometimes sabotage objectives. It's not about immediate gratification at all. It's about sustained access for strategic advantage over a really extended period, which means, a defender might think they've cleaned a network, only for the APT to reappear from a different hidden access point they maintained all along.
And finally, the threat part of APT. Well, it's pretty obvious they're not here to send you cat memes, right? Our source highlights their undeniable geopolitical ties. They're often connected to geopolitical heavyweights like Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, and even Western nations like the US and Israel, with Stuxnet being a prime example of that latter category. They're not lone wolves, the source says, but structured packs with a clear division of labor covering their tracks like digital janitors.
Yes, the threat component is really the ultimate context for understanding why these groups exist and why they demand so much of our attention. Their actions are never random. They are meticulously aligned with national strategic interests, whether it's Russia trying to influence elections or steal cutting-edge military tech, or China engaging in massive intellectual property theft to bolster its economy and military, North Korea funding its regime through sophisticated cybercrime, or Iran targeting regional rivals for geopolitical leverage. Their operations are intrinsically linked to these overarching national objectives. And the mention of Stuxnet is vital because it reminds us that cyber capabilities are a tool of statecraft for many nations, including Western ones. They're used to achieve strategic goals without necessarily resorting to, traditional military engagement. Furthermore, that pack analogy is absolutely spot on. These aren't just individual brilliant hackers working in isolation. They are highly organized, well-structured teams. They often operate with a really clear division of labor, much like a military unit or an intelligence agency. You'll have specialists for the initial reconnaissance, meticulously identifying vulnerabilities and crafting those bespoke phishing campaigns. Then there are the exploit developers who create or acquire the 0 days and the custom malware. After that, post-exploitation teams navigate the compromised networks, escalate privileges, and establish that robust persistence. And finally, you have those who focus on the actual data exfiltration or sabotage, all while other teams work tirelessly to cover their digital tracks and ensure plausible deniability. The sophisticated division of labor allows for incredibly complex, highly effective, and deeply covert operations. It makes them far more dangerous and exponentially more difficult to counter than any individual actor could ever possibly be. They operate with a cohesion and a long-term vision that's truly unmatched.
So, if I'm getting this right, we're essentially talking about the cyber aristocracy here. Entities that are exceptionally well-resourced, incredibly sneaky, strategically patient, and, well, always seem to be one step ahead. They're kind of like that exceptionally clever yet totally uninvited guest who borrows your Netflix password, then proceeds to rearrange your entire streaming queue, and you don't even realize they've been there until you suddenly can't find your favorite show anymore. It's a humorous way to put it, I guess, but it paints a pretty clear picture of their sophisticated, long-term approach to digital infiltration. Okay, so we've kind of established who these digital ninjas are, these cyber aristocrats backed by nation states. But what's their actual playbook? What are the specific steps they take once they've actually set their sights on a target? Our source gives us a fantastic metaphor here. APTs are the marathon runners of cyber attacks, not sprinters. Their core modus operandi is to infiltrate, establish a foothold, and stay hidden while siphoning data or wreaking subtle havoc. How on earth do they manage such a long, drawn-out attack like that?
That marathon analogy is incredibly apt. Yeah. It precisely underscores the strategic, meticulous, and multi-stage nature of their operations. This is never, ever a quick smash and grab. Each step is painstakingly planned, often over really extended periods, and executed with an almost surgical precision. It's really a testament to their patience and, of course, their resources. Let's maybe break down these stages, because understanding them is pretty key to appreciating their whole methodology. First up is reconnaissance. This is essentially the intelligence gathering phase. Our source says scoping out targets like a burglar casing a mansion, but, with digital tools. APTs use a really wide array of methods here. It starts with open source intelligence, or OSINT. That involves meticulously collecting publicly available information on individuals, organizations, their networks, anything they can find. Think social media profiles, corporate websites, press releases, public records. It's all fair game. They also rely heavily on sophisticated social engineering, which, as the source notes, is basically a fancy term for tricking people with phishing emails that look legit. But importantly, for APTs, these aren't generic spam emails. No, these are highly personalized spear phishing emails. They're tailored based on that extensive OSINT they gathered and designed to exploit specific psychological vulnerabilities or professional contexts. They also extensively research and exploit weak links in supply chains. All right, let me clarify on that supply chain attack concept. That's when attackers compromise a trusted third-party vendor or maybe a software provider. They use that initial access as a gateway to infect their ultimate high-value target. It's an indirect route, but incredibly effective for bypassing direct defenses. For example, by compromising a software update mechanism from a trusted vendor, they can then push malicious code out to thousands of that vendor's customers. We saw exactly that with SolarWinds. Now, when it comes to social engineering, these emails are just meticulously crafted. They might mimic internal communications, maybe an urgent request from a senior executive, or even personal emails from a colleague. They'll reference specific projects, use the victim's correct name and title, include legitimate-looking logos or signatures, all the details. This level of customization dramatically increases their effectiveness because, well, the recipient is far more likely to trust and interact with something that appears genuinely relevant to them. Makes them highly effective in bypassing those initial human defenses.
Then comes the initial compromise. This is all about gaining that elusive first entry point. Our source gives a pretty vivid example. Maybe a spear phishing email tailored just for you, like, "Hey CEO, click this urgent kitten video from your board," and then, boom, malware installed.
Okay.
What are the typical outcomes and goals of this really critical first step?
Exactly. Once that reconnaissance has identified a vulnerability, or maybe a susceptible individual, the initial compromise stage aims to gain that first, very stealthy foothold within the target network. This is most often achieved through that precisely crafted spear phishing email, like you mentioned, or by exploiting a known vulnerability, or much more potently, a zero-day vulnerability, in some public-facing system, like a web server, a VPN appliance, maybe an exposed database. Another common technique is what's called a watering hole attack. That's where they compromise a legitimate website that they know their target visits frequently. They inject malware onto that site, which then infects the target when they just browse normally. The immediate goal here is just to get a small, inconspicuous piece of malware, often a really lightweight backdoor or a loader, onto a single system within the target network. This tiny little beachhead then becomes the critical starting point for their deeper infiltration. It allows them to download further tools or establish more persistent presence later on.
After that initial foothold, it's about escalation and lateral movement. Our source describes it brilliantly. Escalate privileges, which is hacker for promoting themselves to admin without asking, and move laterally, meaning spreading like gossip in an office. It sounds like the point where they really start to dig in and map out the whole digital terrain, right?
This stage is indeed where the persistent nature and that deep infiltration truly begin to manifest.
Yeah.
Once they have that initial foothold, they don't just stop there. Not at all. Privilege escalation involves finding ways to gain higher access rights on the system they first compromised. So moving from a regular user account with limited permissions up to an administrator account, or maybe even system-level access. This gives them vastly more control over that system and, crucially, access to more sensitive data. How do they do it? Well, they might exploit a local vulnerability in the operating system or use credential harvesting tools to steal cached passwords. Then comes lateral movement. This is the process of spreading from that initially compromised system to other valuable systems across the network. And APTs use incredibly stealthy techniques for this part. They often exploit misconfigurations in network services, steal credentials using tools like Mimikatz, which can extract passwords right from memory, or they leverage something called living off the land binaries. These are legitimate system tools, things like PowerShell, Windows Management Instrumentation, or WMI, PSEXEC, tools that are already present on target systems. By using these legitimate tools, they can kind of blend in and move silently across the network without introducing new, easily detectable malware. This lateral movement is absolutely crucial. It allows them to identify and access those high-value targets, like critical databases, intellectual property repositories, executive communication servers, maybe even industrial control systems. And it also lets them establish multiple points of presence. So this way, if one entry point gets discovered and closed down, they often have other hidden access points they can use to maintain their persistence. Makes full eradication extremely challenging.
Next up in the playbook is exfiltration. Stealing your goodies bit by bit so alarms don't blare. Yeah, they clearly don't want a Grand Theft Auto alarm blaring. They want a quiet, almost imperceptible siphoning of data. How do they manage to steal potentially vast amounts of data without setting off every single alarm bell in the network?
Precisely. For many APTs, particularly those involved in espionage, this is the ultimate objective. And they go to extreme lengths to ensure it's executed covertly. They absolutely don't want to trigger any alarms, so they employ incredibly stealthy and often highly sophisticated methods for data exfiltration. This often involves compressing and encrypting the stolen data first. Then they break it into small, seemingly innocuous packets. And then they send it out through legitimate-looking network channels. They might use common protocols like HTTP or DNS, or even legitimate cloud storage services to mask the data transfer. Makes it blend right in with normal internet traffic. Some really advanced techniques even involve steganography, that's embedding stolen data within seemingly harmless files like images. This sort of drip-feed approach, where data is exfiltrated in small, staggered chunks over extended periods. It makes it extreme.
And all of this delicate maneuvering is managed through command and control servers, or C2 servers. They use these to phone home, updating their toolkit on the fly. Our source uses a great analogy here, like planting a spy in enemy territory who not only steals blueprints, but also sabotages the coffee machine for good measure. Well, can you explain the critical role C2 plays in maintaining these really long-term operations?
The C2 infrastructure is, quite literally, the lifeline for the APT. It's the secure communication channel they use to maintain control over their compromised systems. It's how they issue new commands, deploy updated malware, or adapt their tactics in real time in response to changes they see in the target environment. These C2 servers are often designed to be highly resilient, geographically distributed. They leverage various communication channels to avoid detection. Makes them incredibly difficult for defenders to identify and ultimately shut down. They might use techniques like domain fronting to hide their true destination behind legitimate content delivery networks, or fast flux DNS to rapidly change the IP addresses associated with their domains. The ability to phone home and receive new instructions is absolutely critical for the long-term management of the breach. It allows the APT to continuously adapt to evolving defenses, gather more intelligence as they go, upload new tools when needed, or prepare for the final stage of their operation, whether that's full-scale sabotage or maybe a final massive data exfiltration push. Without robust C2, an APT operation would quickly fall apart.
What makes them so unique, according to our source, is their comically over-the-top persistence. While regular hackers might bail after grabbing credit cards, APTs hang around like that relative who just needs a place to crash for a week and is still there 6 months later. That's brilliant. And they adapt to defenses, pivoting like a pro dancer dodging lasers in a heist movie. It's an almost, well, absurd level of dedication, isn't it?
That analogy perfectly captures the persistent nature we talked about earlier, yeah. And it's also a testament to the advanced aspect of these groups. APTs don't just deploy a single piece of malware and then hope for the best. No, they're engaged in this dynamic, ongoing battle within the target network. They actively monitor the environment, they observe security responses, and they continuously modify their tactics, their tools, and their infrastructure in real time. So if a particular piece of their custom malware gets detected, they'll just deploy a new, maybe more obfuscated variant. If a C2 channel gets blocked, they'll quickly switch to another pre-established channel they've already set up. This continuous adaptation, often involving significant human oversight and decision-making, is what allows them to maintain access for such incredibly extended periods. It ensures they ultimately achieve their long-term objectives, despite whatever the target's evolving defenses might be. It's really a testament to their resourcefulness and the strategic importance placed on their mission. makes them incredibly difficult to fully eradicate from a compromised network. They basically view detection as just a temporary setback, not a final defeat.
Okay, so we know who these digital ninjas are and what their pretty elaborate playbook looks like. Now let's get to the really intriguing questions. Who is actually signing the checks for these incredibly elaborate digital operations? And what's the ultimate goal behind all this sophisticated cyber mayhem? Our source asks, pointedly, for whom do they toil? Hint, not for charity. It feels like a fairly obvious answer in some ways, but let's dig into the nuances a bit.
That's a crucial point. APTs rarely, if ever, operate as freelancers in the traditional sense. No, they're almost universally on the payroll, either directly or indirectly, of national governments or very large state-aligned organizations. These are not independent contractors or individual hackers working purely for personal gain, not in the primary sense anyway. They are typically extensions of a nation-state's intelligence apparatus, its military cyber command, or perhaps state-backed research institutions. Think of them as dedicated units within espionage arms, like Russia's GRU, which we mentioned, or maybe China's Ministry of State Security. These are powerful entities with very specific geopolitical, economic, and military agendas, and they provide the immense resources and the strategic direction needed for these ops. And if we look at some specific national objectives, the patterns of their operations become incredibly clear, actually. Russian APTs, for example, they're often working directly for the Kremlin. Their missions frequently involve things like meddling in elections in other countries, as we saw with Fancy Bear, or the theft of advanced military technology to enhance their own defense capabilities and strategic positioning. Their motives seem deeply rooted in geopolitical influence, maintaining a sphere of power, and often sowing discord among adversaries.
And Chinese APTs, according to our source, are often laser-focused on pilfering intellectual property to boost their economy. The source adds cheekily, because why innovate when you can borrow from competitors? This sounds less like pure espionage and more like a, national economic strategy.
That's a very blunt way of putting it, but yeah, it's remarkably accurate for a significant portion of Chinese state-sponsored cyber activity we've observed over the years. For decades, Chinese APTs have been systematically targeting corporations, cutting-edge research institutions, defense contractors, and Western nations, all to steal sensitive intellectual property, trade secrets, advanced technological blueprints across a vast array of industries. This stolen data is then often used to rapidly accelerate their own domestic industries, essentially bypassing immense investment in indigenous research and development. It's a direct, calculated strategy to achieve economic and military parity, or maybe even superiority. It aligns particularly well with initiatives like Made in China 2025, which explicitly aims to transform China into a high-tech manufacturing powerhouse. So yes, the economic motor here is profoundly strategic.
Then we have North Korean hackers. Our source vividly describes them as being like the regime's ATM funding nukes through cyber theft. That paints a pretty stark picture, doesn't it? A nation essentially using cybercrime for its own survival.
The North Korean case is indeed distinct and, frankly, quite desperate.
Yeah.
Because of the severe and widespread international sanctions designed to cripple their economy and halt their weapons programs, the regime faces just immense financial pressure. Their APTs, most notably groups like the Lazarus Group, are basically state-mandated revenue generators. It's part of the job description. They engage in large-scale cybercrime, including sophisticated ransomware attacks, incredibly brazen bank heists against financial institutions globally, massive cryptocurrency theft, all specifically to fund the regime's illicit activities, including, yes, its nuclear and ballistic missile programs. This is a really unique situation where cybercrime isn't just about individual financial gain. It's a direct and essential component of state survival and strategic weapon development. It's a very stark example of how cyber operations can become absolutely integral to national policy.
And what about Iranian APTs? Our source says they focus on regional rivals, sabotaging infrastructure for geopolitical flexing. What does that look like in practice?
All right. Iranian APTs are primarily focused on national security objectives within their immediate regional sphere of influence, though it often extends to broader geopolitical adversaries as well. Their targets frequently include critical infrastructure in rival nations, energy companies, and organizations they perceive as supporting their geopolitical opponents. Their operations aim to gather intelligence, project power, and potentially disrupt services in countries they view as adversaries. They leverage cyber capabilities as a tool for that geopolitical flexing, often without necessarily escalating to direct military conflict. We've seen them target critical industrial control systems with malware designed specifically to cause physical damage, for example, or launch disruptive attacks against government services just to demonstrate capability and so instability. They're seeking to gain leverage, destabilize their regional competitors, and counter perceived threats, all through digital means.
You mentioned earlier that only governments typically have the kind of resources needed for these long-haul operations. It makes complete sense that they're the primary employers, and our source even makes a humorous but probably quite telling point about job security. Imagine the performance review. Great work on that data X for living. Bonus, a dacha by the Black Sea and immunity from prosecution.
A slight acknowledgement. Well, while the dacha might be a touch of hyperbole, perhaps, the underlying truth is that government backing provides a level of resources, legal protection at least within their own borders, and strategic direction that no criminal syndicate could genuinely match over the long term. These individuals, remember, are often intelligence operatives or military personnel. Their cyber activities are part of their official duties. This provides immense job security, access to top-tier equipment, cutting-edge research, a vast network of intelligence support, and the necessary infrastructure to conduct these incredibly complex operations over years, not just weeks or months. This institutional support is what truly elevates a sophisticated hacker to the level of an APT actor. While yes, financially motivated criminal empires can certainly fund some advanced hacks, they rarely achieve the sheer scale, the persistence, and the strategic depth of true state-sponsored APTs. And private companies, on the other hand. They are almost overwhelmingly the victims of these groups, not the perpetrators. Unless, perhaps, we're talking about extremely specialized defense contractors who might occasionally operate in a sort of gray area under government contract.
Okay, so we've dug into for whom they toil. Now let's explore that deeper question. Why bother? The motives behind the mayhem. Beyond just, serving a government master, what's the ultimate drive behind all this incredibly intricate and obviously very costly digital maneuvering?
The motivations are indeed layered, yeah. But when you really strip them down, they all kind of converge on the acquisition and the exercise of power, just in its various forms. The primary motive is undeniably espionage, just straight-up spying. This involves the systematic stealing of state secrets, highly sensitive corporate intellectual property, or vast amounts of personal data from targeted individuals or populations. The goal is always to gain a significant, often asymmetric advantage, whether that's in politics, warfare, or economic competition. As the source aptly puts it, it's cyber Cold War stuff nations, spying on each other like jealous neighbors peeking over fences. A successful espionage operation can fundamentally shift geopolitical power dynamics. It can provide a nation with a critical edge in trade negotiations. It might deliver military intelligence that saves lives or tips the balance in a conflict. Or it could even allow a country to leapfrog years of costly research and development, saving literally billions in the process. The impact is profound, it's long-lasting, and importantly, it often goes completely unnoticed by the general public.
And then there's that very dangerous secondary motive, sabotage. The idea of disrupting critical infrastructure, power grids, nukes, to weaken foes without firing shots. That's a genuinely chilling thought, especially when you consider the potential real-world implications.
Indeed. Cyber sabotage represents a truly non-kinetic camus, meaning no physical weapons are fired, yet potentially devastating form of warfare. It allows a state to inflict significant damage, widespread disruption, or even actual physical destruction on an adversary's critical infrastructure. We're talking power grids, water treatment plants, transportation networks, industrial facilities, things we all rely on. And they can do this all without direct military engagement. This approach often sidesteps the immediate political and international fallout that comes with kinetic warfare, yet it can have truly devastating real-world consequences. It can impact civilian life, economic stability, and national security on a massive scale.
It's a highly
Effective way to apply pressure, weaken an opponent, or maybe just demonstrate capability below the traditional threshold of declared war. Makes it a very powerful tool in a nation's strategic arsenal.
Then there's financial gain, which you mentioned is particularly relevant for specific groups like North Korea's Lazarus Group, where it's about funding regimes through ransomware, bank heists.
Yes, this specific motive, as we touched on earlier, is a very unique and critical driver for certain state-sponsored APTs. It's not the norm, but it's vital for them. For countries like North Korea facing those stringent international sanctions that severely cripple their traditional economy and block access to global financial systems, cybercrime becomes an absolutely vital state-mandated revenue stream. It's how they get hard currency. It's not just about illicit wealth for individual hackers. It's about acquiring hard currency to circumvent those sanctions and fund national strategic programs, including their nuclear and ballistic missile development. This makes it literally a matter of national survival for the regime, transforming cybercrime into a direct instrument of state policy.
Our source also adds some humor to the motives, which I always appreciate, even when discussing topics this serious, like, because typing mwahaha in a dark room while earning a network is more fun than therapy. Or, revenge cyber style, you sanctioned us. Fine, enjoy your centrifuges spinning like drunk tops, referring to Stuxnet, presumably. And geopolitics meets pettiness, steal tech to skip R&D costs, meddle in elections because democracy looks fun to troll, or just because our hackers are better than yours. These lighthearted takes actually seem to underscore deeper truths, don't they?
A slight acknowledgement. While they're presented with a wonderfully dry humor, yes, these petty motives do indeed often mask deeper, more strategic objectives, and frankly, psychological drivers. The muhaha feeling. That might represent the profound thrill of the intellectual challenge, the sheer satisfaction of successfully infiltrating a well-defended adversary, and the feeling of power that comes with owning a network. That can be immensely motivating for elite hackers. Revenge, as we saw perhaps with the Sony Pictures hack, demonstrates that cyber operations can absolutely be direct retaliations for perceived slights, even if the strategic objective is also maybe to send a broader message of deterrence or capability, and the because our hackers are better than yours bit. That reflects a very real form of national pride and competition. It's a demonstration of cyber prowess that is, in itself, a significant form of power projection in the digital age. So, while they might seem trivial on the surface, they often serve as expressions of underlying strategic goals and national ambition.
Ultimately, though, our source concludes that it's all about power. Information is the new oil, and APTs are the drill rigs.
That statement perfectly encapsulates the ultimate why. Yes. In the modern, hyper-connected age we live in, information is undeniably the most valuable currency there is. Access to it, and the ability to control or disrupt it, translates directly into power, economic power, political power, military power. APTs are precisely designed to secure this access. They relentlessly gather, disrupt, or leverage information in ways that directly benefit their sponsors' national interests. They are the sophisticated, technologically advanced instruments used by nations to gain and maintain dominance in an increasingly competitive global landscape. Their comprehensive operations, right from the initial reconnaissance through the stealthy exfiltration, are all meticulously geared towards this singular, overarching objective: achieving control through information. It's a relentless, ongoing global struggle for digital supremacy.
All right, now for the juicy part. The real-world APT capers that genuinely read like bad spy novels, but, with more zeros and ones and far-reaching real-world consequences. Our source promises these aren't just one-offs, they're multi-stage epics that have cost billions, embarrassed governments and corporations alike, and fundamentally reshaped how we understand cyber threats. So let's delve into the Hall of Infamy and explore some of these legendary operations in a bit more detail. First up, the truly legendary Stuxnet from 2010, the worm that went nuclear. This was widely attributed to a U.S.-Israel collaboration, right? And it famously targeted Iran's nuclear enrichment program. It didn't just steal data, it physically sabotaged centrifuges. What made Stuxnet such a, groundbreaking and frankly terrifying event in cybersecurity history?
Stuxnet was, and I'm not exaggerating here, a truly groundbreaking incident. It marked one of the very first publicly acknowledged instances where a cyber weapon caused actual physical destruction in the real world. Before Stuxnet, most people thought of cyber attacks largely in terms of data theft or maybe network disruption. But this meticulously crafted worm demonstrated that code could directly manipulate industrial control systems, ICS specifically, Siemens Programmable Logic Controllers, PLCs, which managed centrifuges in this case to cause tangible kinetic damage. The attack itself was ingenious. It infiltrated Iran's air-gapped systems networks, physically isolated from the internet, likely via a compromised USB stick, a low-tech delivery for high-tech doom, as the source says. Once inside, it systematically mapped the network, identified the specific centrifuges it was looking for, and then subtly manipulated their rotation speeds, causing them to literally spin themselves apart, all while reporting completely normal operations back to the control room, hiding the damage. This was an incredibly sophisticated multi-stage attack that utilized 4 different zero-day vulnerabilities, making it almost impossible to detect beforehand. The impact was profound. It's estimated to have delayed Iran's nuclear program by years. Its motive: undeniably geopolitical chess, a strategic move to disrupt nuclear proliferation without resorting to direct military confrontation. The key lesson here was huge. Even the most isolated networks are not immune from meticulously planned, human-vectored intrusions, and it completely reshaped our understanding of cyberkinetic warfare, forcing a global reevaluation of how critical infrastructure is protected.
Okay, next. Operation Aurora from 2009-2010, Google's bad day. This was attributed to Chinese APTs, likely APT-17 or similar, the source suggests, and it aggressively targeted Google, Adobe, and over 30 other major tech and defense giants. The method involved sophisticated spear phishing emails leading to 0 days, ultimately stealing valuable source code and also spying on dissidents. This wasn't just about financial gain either, was it?
No, not at all. Operation Aurora was a real watershed moment because it exposed the sheer boldness and sophistication of state-sponsored intellectual property theft targeting major Western tech companies. The strategic value of stealing source code, the fundamental blueprint of a software product, really cannot be overstated. It provides adversaries with intimate insights into how the technology works, potential vulnerabilities they can exploit later, and even strategic direction for future development. Allows them to replicate or counter it much more easily. The attackers exploited a 0-day vulnerability in Internet Explorer, delivered via those carefully crafted spear phishing emails we discussed. Once inside, they didn't just randomly exfiltrate data, they specifically targeted source code repositories. And, significantly, they also sought to identify Chinese human rights activists who were using Google services at the time. This dual-motive IP theft for economic and military advantage, combined with surveillance for political control, truly revealed the multifaceted nature of these state-sponsored cyber operations. The incident forced a major tech company like Google to publicly acknowledge such a significant breach, highlighting the severe economic and national security implications of state-sponsored corporate espionage. It also compelled Google to fundamentally reassess its operations in China, leading to a major public dispute and ultimately their partial withdrawal from the Chinese market. A huge moment in corporate resistance to state hacking.
Then we have the infamous SolarWinds hack from 2020. Supply chain shenanigans. This one was attributed to Russian APT-29, also known as Cozy Bear, and it was just a masterclass in indirect compromise, wasn't it? They compromised SolarWinds Orion software, effectively backdooring updates that went out to over 18,000 organizations, including huge names like the U.S. Treasury, Microsoft, and countless other critical entities. They lurked for months, stealing emails and intel described as an espionage bonanza. This attack really shook the cybersecurity world to its core, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The SolarWinds hack was indeed a game changer. It was a stark realization of the immense risk posed by these supply chain attacks. It demonstrated how compromising just a single, widely trusted software vendor, in this case SolarWinds, whose Orion IT monitoring platform was used by tens of thousands of organizations globally, can provide a backdoor into thousands upon thousands of its customers, including critical government agencies, military branches, major corporations. The list goes on. The attackers, Cozy Bear, meticulously injected malicious code, which became known as Sunburst, into legitimate SolarWinds software updates. This made the malicious code incredibly difficult to detect because it was signed with a legitimate digital certificate and appeared totally benign. Once installed, the malware established a persistent backdoor. This allowed the attackers to then move laterally, elevate their privileges, and stealthily exfiltrate sensitive data, including emails and intelligence, for months before they were finally discovered. This particular attack also leveraged really sophisticated techniques like Golden SAML, which allowed them to basically forge authentication credentials and bypass multi-factor authentication. The profound implications here stem from the fact that it exploited the very trust inherent in software ecosystems. Organizations implicitly trust their vendors to deliver secure products. And when that trust is breached on such a massive scale, it leads to widespread deep infiltration that is incredibly hard to unearth and remediate. It really highlighted how a single point of failure in a supply chain can have catastrophic, cascading effects globally, affecting national security and economic stability for years. The estimated cost of just remediation and investigation has been in the tens of billions of dollars, maybe more.
Next up, Black Energy from 2015. Lights out in Ukraine. This involved a Russian APT attributed to the Sandworm team. They used Black Energy malware to hit Ukraine's power grid, causing actual blackouts for 230,000 people right in the middle of winter. The method was phishing into utilities, then remote control. This wasn't just about stealing data, it was about weaponizing cyber capabilities to cause real-world physical disruption. Fundamentally changed the game, didn't it?
Black Energy was a truly chilling realization of cyber attacks' direct, tangible impact on civilian life. Absolutely. This incident unequivocally moved beyond just data theft or system disruption to actively shutting down critical national infrastructure, leaving hundreds of thousands of people without power in freezing conditions back in December 2015. The Sandworm team initiated the attack with sophisticated spear phishing emails targeting employees at Ukrainian energy companies, gaining that initial access. They then deployed the black energy malware, which allowed them to gain remote control over the industrial control systems, ICS, that manage the power substations. They also utilized kill disk malware to wipe data on the systems, which significantly hindered recovery efforts afterwards. This wasn't just a technical achievement, it was a clear demonstration of force. A clear act of hybrid warfare designed to punish Ukraine for its perceived Western leanings and to sow widespread panic and instability. It undeniably elevated cyber warfare as a legitimate and highly dangerous component of state conflict strategies. It demonstrated that states are willing and able to use cyber means to inflict physical harm on a civilian population, essentially bypassing traditional military engagements. The image of lights flickering off, controlled by a remote adversary somewhere, that became a stark new reality for everyone.
Okay, our fifth entry in the Hall of Infamy is the Sony Pictures hack from 2014, Hollywood's Nightmare. This was attributed to a North Korean APT, the Guardians of Peace, a name just dripping with irony since they brought absolutely zero peace to Sony. They leaked films, executive emails, vast amounts of sensitive corporate data, all apparently in retaliation for the Interview movie mocking Kim Jong-un. So this was a state-sponsored attack primarily driven by a perceived cultural affront rather than traditional espionage, correct?
Yes, the Sony Pictures hack was indeed unique in that sense. It starkly blurred the lines between a typical cyber attack and direct censorship or retaliation against creative works. It demonstrated a nation-state's willingness to launch a destructive cyber attack against a private company, not primarily for espionage or traditional sabotage goals, but as a punitive measure for a perceived cultural or political slight, in this case, the satirical film The Interview. The North Korean APT used wiper malware, which is specifically designed to destroy data and render systems completely inoperable rather than just steal information. This resulted in the wiping of thousands of computers, servers, and also the exfiltration of massive amounts of highly sensitive data. We're talking unreleased films, embarrassing executive emails, employee personal data, business plans, a huge trove. The incident cost Sony reportedly over $15 million directly, led to canceled film releases, and created a massive public relations crisis as all that internal communication and celebrity gossip became public fodder. This incident really highlighted the potential for cyber warfare to extend into areas of cultural and artistic expression. It raised significant questions about free speech, state-sponsored digital retaliation, and the unprecedented scope of nation-state aggression against purely private entities. It's a very clear message. States would use their cyber capabilities to enforce their will, even when it came to creative endeavors.
Moving on to Triton Crisis in 2017. Industrial sabotage gone wild. This attack, likely orchestrated by an Iranian or possibly Russian APT, specifically targeted a Saudi petrochemical plant's safety systems. They used Triton malware with the horrifying goal of actually causing explosions. This goes way beyond disruption. It moves right into the realm of physical destruction and potential loss of life.
Triton, also known as Trisis, represents another absolutely terrifying escalation in cyber warfare. The direct targeting of industrial safety systems. Yes. This malware was meticulously designed to manipulate safety instrumented systems, or SIS, within critical industrial facilities. Now, SIS are the absolute last line of defense in plants like these. They're designed to automatically detect dangerous conditions and shut down hazardous processes to prevent accidents, explosions, or environmental catastrophes. Triton's objective was to disable or manipulate these critical safeguards, thereby creating the conditions for potentially catastrophic physical damage, like explosions at a petrochemical plant. It exploited vulnerabilities specifically in Triconics safety controllers. The fact that this attack, which was clearly aiming for physical destruction and potentially mass casualties, was ultimately foiled by a programming glitch in the malware itself. A glitch which accidentally caused some systems to shut down safely, triggering alarms, rather than allowing the attack to progress silently as intended. The fact that it was foiled by that, rather than by detection from the plant's security team, just underscores how incredibly close we potentially came to a major industrial disaster. This incident highlighted the extreme, real-world safety implications when APTs move beyond data theft or network disruption to direct attempts at physical destruction. Makes it a critical case study for operational technology, OT, and industrial control system, ICS security.
Our seventh example is the Microsoft Exchange hacks from 2021. Hafnium's email party. This involved a Chinese APT, Hafnium. They exploited 0 days in Exchange servers, impacting reportedly 250,000 plus organizations worldwide for mass espionage, grabbing emails like free samples at Costco, as our source puts it. This really felt like a global cybersecurity emergency unfolding in real time, didn't it?
The Microsoft Exchange server attacks, attributed initially to hafnium, but likely involving other Chinese APTs as well, were indeed a global cybersecurity emergency, primarily due to their sheer scale and the incredibly widespread adoption of Exchange servers globally as a core enterprise email and collaboration platform. The attackers exploited multiple zero-day vulnerabilities, collectively known now as Proxylogan and later Proxy Shell. These flaws allowed them to gain remote code execution on vulnerable Exchange servers and install web shells, basically, backdoors. This gave them persistent access and enabled mass espionage, allowing them to steal emails, contact lists, and other sensitive data from an enormous number of organizations, worldwide government agencies, businesses, nonprofits, you name it. The rapid exploitation of these 0 days meant that hundreds of thousands of organizations were likely compromised before patches were even available or widely applied. The incident triggered this global scramble for patching, detection, and mitigation. It highlighted the profound and systemic vulnerability that can arise when core enterprise software, which so many organizations rely on, is successfully targeted by sophisticated adversaries. The cost of remediation and the ongoing privacy implications continue to be immense.
Next, the DNC hack from 2016, Fancy Bear's election meddling. This was Russian APT 28, Fancy Bear again, that leaked Democratic emails via WikiLeaks. The method. Apparently, phishing a Podesta's account, with the source adding parenthetically password, come on, base. The motive was clearly to sow chaos, favor certain candidates in U.S. elections. This attack really brought cyber warfare into the public consciousness in a way maybe nothing before it had, didn't it?
The DNC hack was absolutely a pivotal moment for understanding how cyber operations can directly impact democratic processes and public perception on a national, even global scale.
Yep.
While the technical methods used primarily spear phishing that compromised John Podesta's email account, allegedly due to a simple mistyped password response by an aide, weren't necessarily revolutionary in themselves. The strategic deployment of the stolen information through intermediaries like WikiLeaks was the key part. The aim was clearly to sow discord, influence public opinion, and potentially favor certain political outcomes in a major national election. This incident profoundly demonstrated the non-kinetic, yet highly effective, means by which state actors can interfere in the internal affairs of other nations. It sparked widespread debates about disinformation, foreign interference, and the security of democratic institutions that continue today. It remains a stark reminder of the deep intersection of cybersecurity and geopolitics, illustrating how information itself can be weaponized to shape narratives and undermine trust in political systems. The post-attack fallout, including the lengthy Mueller probe, deeply impacted the political landscape for years.
Number 9 on our list is the Mosaic transfer breach from 2023, Clop's data grab. This involved a Russian-linked group called Clop. Our source notes they're not quite pure APT, but persistent. They exploited Moviet file transfer flaws. Targets included hundreds of organizations like British Airways, and the motive seemed to be primarily ransomware riches. This again exposed the deep vulnerability of supply chains, didn't it?
Yes, the movie transfer breach really highlights the increasingly blurred lines we're seeing between traditional state-sponsored APTs and highly sophisticated, financially motivated cybercrime groups that exhibit very APT-like persistence and capabilities. While Clop is primarily considered a financially motivated cybercrime group, their methods often exhibit the sophistication, the resourcefulness, and sometimes the zero-day exploitation typically associated with nation-state actors. This incident, once again, underscored the immense vulnerability inherent in our digital supply chains. Movie Transfer is a widely used managed file transfer software. By exploiting a critical SQL injection vulnerability, the attackers were able to access and exfiltrate sensitive data from hundreds of organizations that simply use the software, including government entities, major corporations, financial institutions, without needing to directly breach each one individually. It just reinforced that notion that you are only as secure as your weakest vendor in your supply chain. And these types of indirect attacks can lead to massive data breaches affecting millions of individuals and numerous organizations simultaneously, often with the ultimate goal of extorting large ransoms.
And finally, number 10, the Equifax breach from 2017, credit score catastrophe. Allegedly, a Chinese APT stole the personal data of 147 million people via an unpatched vulnerability. The motive, an absolute identity theft goldmine. Our source quips Equifax, guardians of credit, got their own score tanked to zero. This incident really became a rallying cry for basic cybersecurity hygiene, didn't it? More than anything else.
The Equifax breach was truly catastrophic, primarily due to the sheer volume and the incredible sensitivity of the personal data that was stolen. We're talking basically everything needed for comprehensive identity theft for nearly half the U.S. population: names, dates of birth, social security numbers, addresses. The works. While it was attributed to a Chinese APT, perhaps the most poignant and frankly infuriating lesson from this incident was the critical importance of basic cyber hygiene, specifically timely patching. The breach occurred because Equifax failed to patch a known vulnerability in its Apache Struts web application framework, despite a patch being publicly available for months beforehand. This demonstrated starkly that even the most sophisticated adversaries can and will exploit simple, unaddressed weaknesses. The long-term personal impact of such a massive data breach affecting credit scores and financial security for millions of people for years to come is just immense and ongoing. It served as a stark, painful reminder that even when you're facing advanced threats, fundamental security practices like diligently patching your systems are absolutely non-negotiable. It truly cemented patch your servers as a cybersecurity mantra, if nothing else did.
And that, my friends, is truly just the visible tip of an incredibly vast and dangerous iceberg. APTs evolve faster than fashion trends, it seems, with new, shadowy groups constantly emerging, like China's Salt Typhoon, which we're seeing actively spying on U.S. telecoms right now in 2024. They consistently keep things fresh and, well, dangerous. Why so many? Because cyber warfare is, in many ways, cheap warfare. There are no troops to deploy, just lines of code capable of immense disruption and espionage. Hashtag, outro. So what does all of this mean for you, our dedicated listener? If you've been with us on this deep dive, hopefully you now understand that APTs are far more than just hackers. They are the sophisticated state-backed boogeymen of the digital world, relentlessly persisting in networks for espionage, sabotage, or sometimes just cold hard cash, driven by these power games that seem like they never truly end. As our source so expertly blended, these operations can seem darkly humorous in retrospect, like a perfectly executed heist movie gone wrong. But they are absolutely devastating in real time when it's your data, your infrastructure, or even your literal lights that are on the line. What these incidents collectively reveal isn't just the who or the what, but a fundamental paradigm shift, really. The battlefield is now digital, and intellectual property is the new currency. And that demands a fundamentally different approach to security and national strategy from all of us.
And that profound understanding directly leads us to the essential defensive strategies. Because while APTs are incredibly sophisticated and well-resourced, there are concrete, practical steps that can significantly mitigate your risk. Whether you're managing a large enterprise network or just trying to protect your personal data, the core defenses really revolve around robust cyber hygiene. Religiously applying patches to all your software and systems, as we tragically learned with Equifax, is absolutely non-negotiable. Implementing multi-factor authentication everywhere possible adds a crucial, almost impenetrable layer of security. It makes it exponentially harder for attackers to leverage stolen credentials for that lateral movement we talked about. At the enterprise level, this means moving beyond simple perimeter defenses. It means investing heavily in advanced threat detection tools, things like those offered by CrowdStrike or Sentinel-Alone, which utilize AI and behavioral analytics to identify and respond to these persistent threats that blend in so well. Furthermore, embracing an assume breach mindset is critical. Having robust incident response plans ready, network segmentation in place, and proactive threat hunting, it's all paramount. The constant need for vigilance in a world of evolving threats just cannot be overstated. It's a continuous, active defense that requires constant adaptation.
So remember, in cybersecurity, a healthy dose of paranoia is probably your best friend. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and always be just a little bit skeptical. Because if you're not, well, you just might wake up one day to find an APT has already redecorated your entire digital life, changed all your passwords, and maybe ordered their favorite takeout, all on your dime. Keep learning, stay curious, and definitely keep those digital doors locked tight.